Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Common Ground English. I'm Claire, and I'm really happy you're spending part of your day with me. Today, I'd like you to imagine something. You're sitting in a room. Maybe it's a job interview. Maybe it's the first day of a class. Maybe you've just joined an online meeting. Everything feels normal until someone smiles at you and says, "So, tell me about yourself." Suddenly, your mind goes completely blank. You know your own name. You know where you're from. You know what you do. But somehow, you don't know where to begin. Should you talk about your job, your family, your hobbies, your dreams? Or maybe, should you just smile and hope someone changes the subject? If that sounds familiar, don't worry. You're definitely not alone. Today we're going to talk about why this simple question feels so difficult, how you can answer it naturally, and later in today's episode, my friend Ethan will join me for a fun little challenge. We'll both answer the same question. Tell me about yourself. And you'll see that there isn't only one correct answer. So, let's begin. I've always found it interesting that one of the simplest questions in English can also be one of the hardest to answer. Think about it. Nobody asks, "Tell me about gravity," or "Tell me about history." They ask about you, the one person you know better than anyone else. And yet, many people freeze. Why? I don't think it's because we don't know ourselves. I think it's because we're trying to find the perfect answer. We want people to like us. We want to sound intelligent, interesting, funny, confident. We start editing every sentence before we even say it, and that's exhausting. The truth is, people usually aren't looking for a perfect answer. They're simply trying to get to know you. It's not an exam. It's an invitation. They're saying, "I'd like to know who you are." That's a very different way of thinking about it. A few years ago, I attended a small community event. There were about 20 people in the room. At the beginning, the organizer asked everyone to introduce themselves. One by one, people stood up. Some spoke for almost 5 minutes. They listed every achievement, every qualification, every interesting thing they'd ever done. Honestly, after a while, I couldn't remember any of it. Then one woman stood up. She smiled and said, "Hi, I'm Emma. I recently moved here. I love baking bread, hiking on weekends, and I'm still looking for the best coffee shop in town." She sat down. That was it. Less than 20 seconds. Do you know what happened during the coffee break? Almost everyone went to talk to Emma. Someone recommended a bakery. Someone invited her hiking. Another person suggested a coffee shop. Why? Because she gave people something they could connect with. Not because her introduction was longer, but because it felt real. That's something I've never forgotten. People don't remember long introductions. They remember genuine ones. Sometimes, less really is more. Have you ever listened to someone introduce themselves and thought, "Wow, they sound so confident"? I used to think that too. I imagine those people had prepared the perfect introduction, the perfect words, the perfect smile, the perfect voice. But after talking with many people, I realized something surprising. Most confident speakers don't have a perfect script. They simply know the first sentence. After that, the conversation grows naturally. That's a huge difference. Many English learners try to memorize an entire paragraph. Something like this. "Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah. I am 27 years old. I graduated from..." They try to remember every single word. And what happens? The moment they forget one sentence, everything disappears. Instead, I'd like you to imagine your introduction as building with Lego bricks. Not one long speech, just a few small pieces. The first brick is your name. Hi, I'm Claire. Simple, natural. Nobody expects anything more. The second brick, a little about your life. I live in Singapore. Or, I'm originally from Brazil. Or, I work as a graphic designer. Again, very simple. The third brick, something you enjoy. I love reading mystery novels. I'm really into photography. I spend most weekends hiking. Now people have something they can respond to. They might say, really? What's your favorite book? Or, I've always wanted to try hiking. See what happened? The conversation is no longer about introducing yourself. Now, you're simply talking. And that's where real communication begins. I think that's the biggest misunderstanding. People believe the goal is to introduce themselves perfectly. But that's not the goal. The goal is to start a conversation. Nothing more, nothing less. Let me give you another example. Imagine I asked you, tell me about yourself. You could say, hi, I'm Daniel. I'm from Mexico. I work in IT. I enjoy cooking, especially Italian food. Recently, I've been trying to improve my English because I'd like to travel more. Notice something? None of those sentences are difficult. There's no advanced grammar, no complicated vocabulary, no impressive expressions. And yet, you already know quite a lot about Daniel. You know where he's from. You know his job. You know one of his hobbies. And you even know one of his goals. That's enough to begin a conversation. Sometimes, we think speaking English means using bigger words. But communication doesn't become better because the words become longer. It becomes better when people understand us. I remember meeting a traveler while waiting for a train a few years ago. He smiled and said, hi, I'm Leo. I'm from Argentina. I'm traveling around Asia for 3 months. Honestly, I get lost almost every day. We both laughed. That last sentence changed everything. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't trying to impress anyone. It was honest, funny, human. Within 5 minutes, we were talking about food, travel, different cultures, and our favorite places to visit. Not because he had an amazing introduction, but because he sounded like a real person. That's another thing I'd like you to remember. People connect with people, not performances. You don't have to sound like a TED Talk speaker. You don't have to sound like a news reporter. You just have to sound like you. So the next time someone asks, tell me about yourself, don't think, I need to impress them. Instead think, I'm simply sharing a little piece of my life. That small change in mindset makes speaking English feel much easier. Before we continue, I'd like to try something a little different. My friend Ethan is joining us today. We're both going to answer exactly the same question. Tell me about yourself. But I have a feeling our answers will be completely different. And that's exactly the point. Let's welcome Ethan. And joining me today is my good friend Ethan. Hi, Ethan.
Hi, Claire. It's great to be back. And hello to everyone who's listening today.
I'm really glad you're here. We've been talking about one question that makes a lot of people nervous. Tell me about yourself. So, I thought it would be fun if we answered that question ourselves. Are you ready?
I think so. Although, now I'm feeling a little nervous too.
See? Even after all this talking, it still feels a little strange.
Exactly. I think that's because we're not used to talking about ourselves. It's actually harder than talking about almost anything else.
Okay, I'll go first. Hi, everyone. I'm Claire. I'm originally from a small town, but these days I live in a much bigger city. I spend most of my time creating English content, reading books, and drinking way too much coffee. One thing people usually notice about me is that I ask a lot of questions. Not because I'm trying to interview everyone, but because I'm genuinely curious about people. I love hearing their stories. Whether someone is a teacher, a taxi driver, a student, or a traveler, everyone has something interesting to share. And I think that's one of the reasons I enjoy hosting this podcast so much. I get to learn something new every day.
I like that introduction. It feels very you.
Really? Why do you say that?
Because you didn't try to sound impressive. You just sounded honest. When you mentioned coffee, I immediately thought, yep, that definitely sounds like Claire.
Okay, your turn. Tell us about yourself.
All right. Hi everyone. I'm Ethan. I work in software development. Most weekdays you'll find me sitting in front of a computer, trying to solve problems. Sometimes I solve them quickly. Sometimes, the computer wins. Outside of work, I enjoy cooking, especially simple meals that don't create too many dirty dishes. I'm also trying to become a better photographer. I'm still learning. Most of my photos aren't perfect, but I enjoy the process. I also love traveling whenever I get the chance. Not because I want to visit famous places, but because I enjoy meeting people from different cultures. Every trip teaches me something new.
See, I think that's a perfect example. You didn't tell us everything about your life, but I already feel like I know you better.
Exactly. I didn't mention my age, or where I went to school, or every job I've ever had, because none of those things were necessary. A good introduction isn't a life story. It's simply an invitation.
Can I ask you something?
Of course.
What makes someone interesting to you?
That's a good question. Honestly, it's not their job. It's not how much money they make. It's not even how exciting their hobbies are. For me, interesting people are curious people. They ask questions. They listen carefully. And they become excited when someone else shares a story. Those are the conversations I remember.
I completely agree. Sometimes, people think they need an extraordinary life to have interesting conversations. But I don't believe that's true. Some of the best conversations I've ever had were about completely ordinary things. Cooking dinner, walking a dog, missing a train, learning a new hobby. Ordinary moments become interesting when people talk about them honestly. Let's do something fun. I'll give you 3 words. You have to introduce yourself using all 3. Ready?
Let's do it.
Coffee. Travel. Photography.
Hi, I'm Ethan. I'm someone who probably drinks more coffee than water. I love traveling because every place has a different story to tell. And whenever I visit somewhere new, I always carry my camera. Not because I'm trying to take the perfect picture, but because I want to remember how that place made me feel.
That only took, what, 20 seconds?
Maybe.
And yet, it felt natural. It didn't sound memorized. It sounded like a conversation. I think that's the biggest lesson from today's episode. Don't memorize paragraphs. Memorize ideas. Know a few things about yourself that you're happy to share. Then, let the conversation grow naturally.
Exactly. Because no 2 introductions should sound the same. Everyone has a different story. And that's what makes conversations interesting.
I couldn't agree more. After the break, Ethan and I are going to share a simple exercise that can help you become much more confident when talking about yourself in English. And don't worry, it only takes a few minutes a day. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Before we finish today's episode, there's one last idea I'd love to talk about. It's something I didn't really understand until a few years ago. When we're younger, we often introduce ourselves by talking about what we do. I'm a student. I'm an engineer. I'm a designer. But as I get older, I think people become much more interested in who we are not just what we do.
I know exactly what you mean. If someone asked me who I was 10 years ago, I probably would have started with my job. Now, I think I'd start with what I enjoy. Or what I'm curious about. Because that's the part that usually creates a connection. Not my job title.
Exactly. If someone tells me, I love baking bread every Sunday, I'm immediately interested. Even if I've never baked bread in my life. Because I can ask questions. I can learn something. I can imagine that person's life. That's what makes conversations memorable.
There's something else I've noticed. People often think they need an interesting life before they can have interesting conversations. But I don't think that's true at all. Interesting conversations don't come from extraordinary lives. They come from paying attention to ordinary moments.
That's beautifully said. Think about it. We've all had mornings where we overslept, burned our breakfast, missed a bus, forgot someone's birthday, lost our keys. Those aren't exciting stories. But when someone tells them with honesty, they're often funny, or relatable, or both.
Exactly. People connect through shared experiences, not through perfection.
Can I ask everyone listening a small favor? Wherever you are, think about these 3 questions. You don't need to answer them out loud. Just think. What's something you enjoy doing? What's something you're trying to learn? And what's one small thing that made you smile this week? That's it. 3 simple questions. Now, imagine someone asked, tell me about yourself. You already have something to say. Not because you memorized a speech, but because you're talking about your real life.
I love that exercise. It reminds us that introductions don't have to sound impressive. They only have to sound human.
Before we wrap up, there's one sentence I'd like everyone to remember from today's episode. You don't need a perfect introduction. You just need a real one. Because people rarely remember the longest introduction. They remember the one that felt genuine. The one that made them smile, or laugh, or feel connected. And maybe that's the whole point of introducing ourselves. Not to impress someone, but to begin a conversation that might become a friendship. Ethan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I always enjoy these conversations. And if you're listening, here's a little challenge for you. The next time someone asks, tell me about yourself. Don't try to sound perfect. Just be yourself. You might be surprised by how well the conversation goes.
I love that advice. Thanks again, Ethan. We'll definitely have you back for another episode soon.
I'd love that. See you next time, everyone.
Before you go, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. Learning English isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more comfortable being yourself. In another language, every conversation you have, every mistake you make, every new person you meet, is another step forward. So don't wait until you feel completely ready. Start with one sentence, then another, and another. Little by little, you'll discover that confidence doesn't come before speaking. It comes because you keep speaking. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love to hear from you. Here's today's question. How would you introduce yourself in just 3 sentences? Write your answer in the comments. I'll be reading them, and I can't wait to learn a little about you. Until next time, take care. Keep listening. Keep speaking. And remember, every conversation is a chance to grow. I'm Claire. This is Common Ground English. Bye for now.